Now, the word fisc in Greek means that public treasury or government funds. That's exactly the word that we are looking for, and this is what we are going to discuss in the coming session. United States of America, when it declared itself as a capitalistic economy to the world, the primary driving force behind it was that they were able to create opportunity for everybody. India as a country, we need to really praise because we were the people who taught the world the meaning of savings. Good morning and welcome to the first session, Chapter 3, Unit 1, first semester BCom, Pre-Reforms of Indian Economy, where we are going to talk about the fiscal policy in India. Now, this is a kind of thing that deals with the revenue and expenditure policy of the government. So this is a very, very important topic for us. Why? Because everybody can speak about or know more about the monetary policy in India, and that's how we have been speaking about, because whenever you take a newspaper, whenever you read through it, you will be able to understand that people are only talking about the revenue and expenditure. But the factor of fiscal policy is a matter of importance and national importance. Why? Because this actually makes you understand where exactly the government is standing in terms of expenditure, in terms of the revenue generation altogether. Now, the word fisc in Greek means that public treasury or government funds. That's exactly the word that we are looking for, and this is what we are going to discuss in the coming session. So we are going to understand how the government will utilize the money for public expenditure and will also create a revenue generation, a revenue engine for sourcing the money so that we are able to get a stabilized economy. Moving further, now let's talk about the objectives of fiscal economy, the fiscal policy altogether. Our target is to get the higher economic growth, price stability, reduction in inequality. Now, these three factors will matter a lot as I'm talking about the fiscal policy in India. The most important thing that as an economist that anybody would love to look into is the higher economic growth. When I talk about the word higher economic growth, it doesn't mean that I'm just talking about the credit and debit balance on your balance sheet. What I'm exactly trying to talk about is the growth in terms of your revenue, growth in terms of opportunity, growth in terms of employment, growth in terms of stability of income. That's exactly where the higher economic growth gets induced and taken forward altogether, followed by the word called as price stability. That's very, very important for all of us. Why? Because price stability would definitely make us understand the factor that this understanding, this factor of the growth has to come under a particular price stability level. It has to come under the stabilization of prices that happens in an economy. So whenever we talk about inflation, we also look into the factor that if we keep on increasing the prices and the income also gets unstabilized, then automatically what happens is that the common man is not able to achieve his needs and wants. So at some point of time, it is very important for us to understand how are we going to achieve this price stability. So moment we try to get into it, we try to stabilize the prices by controlling the inflation, it becomes a very, very balanced economy, and we are able to see that the common man is able to match his income to expenditure. The third and the most important thing that we are talking about is reduction in inequality. Now, what is a reduction in inequality all about? Whenever I use the word equality and inequality, that means there is some amount of disturbance, there is some amount of violation, there is some amount of movement that comes inside the society. So when I say that people are unequal in terms of income, people are unequal in terms of opportunities, people are unequal in terms of growth, that would resemble to me a disturbed, a disengaged society altogether. A society needs to have equality well bred within the citizens of that particular country. The reason is very simple. The more you breed inequality, the more is the disturbance in the society. Now, when you talk about certain societies of the world where people again start thinking that those countries are not stable, those countries have led into unnecessary problems like terrorism or higher inflation, or when you start looking into an antisocial element activities going on, the primary reason there is the inequality that is caused. So if you have to reduce that inequality, you need to understand, you need to create opportunities for everybody, every level, every section of the society. That's exactly how you will be able to reduce inequality. Now, just going back for a moment, United States of America, when it declared itself as a capitalistic economy to the world, the primary driving force behind it was that they were able to create opportunity for everybody, for every class, for every mass of these sections of the society, which means to say that US tries to provide job for anything and everything. There is a white-collar job, there is a blue-collar job, and there is also a collarless job available. So what happens over a period of time is that as the society and sections try to improve, the people have multiple earnings opportunities that come across, and that's why probably somewhere the inequality gets completely bridged. But in a society like India, what happens is that there are certain sections of society which are being completely ignored. So these sections struggle to come back into the mainstream of the economy. They struggle to establish their identity. They find that there is no scope of economic growth within their states, and that leads to a migration altogether. So that's why I would always say that you need to be really careful about this concept called as inequality. We need to develop equality among all people in the society. Followed by the objectives of fiscal policy, the consumption control that we are talking about. This is the way by which the ratio of savings to income is raised. India as a country, we need to really praise, because we were the people who taught the world the meaning of savings. The savings concept is something that is imbibed in a child right from the beginning in India. We always believe that the savings to income should be 50-50. And that's now an untold ratio, an unsung ratio to you altogether. Suppose you are earning 100 rupees per month, an example, that means you spend 50 and save another 50 rupees. Now that's how the Indian mentality is governed upon. That's how the Indian mentality is predominantly spoken about. Over a period of time, what happens here is that we start understanding that raising the rate of investment is also one of the most important factors. Why? Because moment you indulge everybody into the act of investing, automatically the system goes up. You see a lot of money coming out, and the movement of the monetary factors will also create a better factor altogether. Now, taxation, infrastructure development, yes, we are definitely talking about it. Why? Because we need to develop the infrastructure. We need to build a better society. Imposition of progressive taxes. We don't want taxes to be a stagnant one. We never want the taxes to be a mandatory push over on the income. We want the taxes to be progressive, which means to say that taxes should be dynamic with the income factor. You cannot develop a system where you just go ahead and say that, yes, this is a taxation. No, that's not what we mean by taxation. What we mean by taxation is that we are trying to make you understand the linearity between the income and taxes. We need to have a dynamic system that understands the progress. Now, the next thing is that exemption from taxes provided to the vulnerable classes. Now, there are many sections of India which are still underprivileged. There are many sections in India which do not have the access to income. They still feel that they have not been given the right opportunity to get exposed, to learn, to earn, and to come out and establish themselves as an identity. Now, those classes definitely need an exemption when it comes to income tax. Now, one side, anybody could go ahead and make a claim saying that income tax is the direct source of revenue for the government. No doubts about it, no arguments on that. But the other side, you need to understand that if you're going to tax everybody, if you're going to tax especially those vulnerable people, those poor people, those people who are below the poverty line in India, that is going to be a dangerous effect on the human and societal factors altogether. Because they're already struggling, they're not being able to make that income where they're able to survive on the daily path. On the top of it, when you put down the pressure of taxation on them, that even more breaks down their lifestyle. Followed by heavy taxation on luxury goods and discouraging unearned income. India has always been a land of luxury as well as a land of kind of unearned income. I would not use the word black money here. Why? Because this is not only pertaining to India, this is pertaining to the entire globe here. Now, India is no less in terms of luxury goods. We always love luxury goods. We always believe in luxury goods, and we are one of the largest importers of luxury goods. You name any brand starting from Gucci, Armani, Prada, or you're going to talk about any of those top brands in this world, we have those brands in India. And we are ardent fans of those clubs. At the end of the day, what happens here is that in order to earn these luxury goods, somewhere there is an income disconnect. I would use this word. Why? Because you see that a section of society which struggles to have 3 square meals. And you see a section of society which spends splurging money on this kind of luxury goods. There's a vast gap, I would always like to say. Why? Because the rich and the poor concept in India is too big. The rich are getting richer and richer, and the poor are getting poorer and poorer. That's exactly, the gap continues to get divided. It becomes too wide, what I'm talking about. Somewhere we need to strike the balance, which we are not getting. So what fiscal policy would try to aim here is that discourage that black money, discourage that unearned income factors, discourage those kind of things which lead to a luxury life altogether, put a heavy tax on the imported luxury goods. Followed by, what are the components of this fiscal policy as we are talking about? We have the government receipts, we have the expenditure factor, and we have the public debt coming into picture. Now, when we talk about receipts, those are the income factor, expenditure, which means to say that these are the sections where Government of India is going to spend money, and the public debt, where the government has borrowed money altogether. Now, let's get into it. Let's talk about the government receipts altogether. The categorization of government receipts are given below. Revenue receipt, which means we get revenue from tax, we get revenue from the direct tax and from the indirect tax. And what about the non-taxable, like fees, license and permits, fines and penalties? So you will be able to see that there is a comprehensive view here, which actually will try to put down the entire factor, which will actually make you understand about this factor very clearly, that the government is actually making money from tax, both in a direct and indirect manner. Also, the government is actually trying to take money in terms of fees, in terms of license, fines and penalties. These are the revenue generators for the government. So in the long run, they would make a definite sense for them. They are the major receipts through which the government is making a huge amount of revenue for their survival. Followed by the capital receipt. What are the capital receipts that we are getting? The loans recovery. Of course, the loans that are being borrowed, and once they have been recovered by the government, yes, they make a positive vibe altogether because they get in a lot of money to the government. Followed by the disinvestments that we are talking about. Disinvestments is where I'm going to talk about the PSU sector. Why? Because of late, the government of India is very, very particular in selling away those public sector enterprises or units which are not making any profits. On the other hand, what happens is that by keeping those non-performing public sector unions, the amount of pressure that goes up on the government by just paying salary, by making them look more bad debts altogether, is actually breaking down the growth sector for us. So what we look in here is that every year we make a plan for disinvestment. We try to see that which are all the sectors that could be probably privatized, that could be probably sold off, disposed altogether, so that that money can come into the revenue cycle. Followed by borrowing and other other liabilities, which is also a part of the capital receipt, which means to say that yes, the government will also look into it as a mainstream form of income, and that's how we move into the debt track. Also, the next one which we are talking about, situation where the borrower has to borrow again and again for the payments and he is not able to repay back the old payment. Now, in India, there has been certain situations where I would like to say that to improvise a sector, we have always borrowed money. And now what happens is that we believe at one point of juncture that this would continue to grow, this would continue to make a better alley altogether, but unfortunately that just becomes a dry well at the end of the day. You keep on pumping funds into that particular sector, but at one fine morning you understand that there is no return on investment. So now what happens is that automatically you enter into a debt trap. Why do you enter into a debt trap? Is because you will start understanding this trap was created because you kept on borrowing on the top of it. You were just topping up your entire borrowings, and one fine morning it just crashed down, it just fell down like a pack of cards. So that's exactly what we try to do here, is that we try to make the government, we try to make the understanding very clear that we are not going to invest in the non-performing assets of India, and we don't want to invest too much into certain sectors where we don't see any certainty in terms of growth. Followed by the government expenditure. Now that's classified under the interest payments, defense payments, salaries to the central government employees, etc. Followed by the capital expenditure. It is a non-recurring expenditure altogether. So we will also be talking about loan repayments, loan to public enterprises. All these factors are going to be a part of the system altogether. So this is going to be a very, very important factor that we are going to talk about. It's going to talk about the payments that we are making in terms of interest payments that we are doing it. The payment to the defense, which is one of the most secured sector, one of the most important sectors. Salaries to the central government. We're talking about more than about 3 million people who are working in that particular sector, plus the expenditure made in terms of the loans and the repayments, the loans to the public enterprises. Yes, because we have borrowed money for the public enterprises, so we need to repay back. So that is also going to be a big expenditure for the government. Followed by, what is this fiscal consolidation? Consolidation comes under the process where we try to improve the deficit. Now, let me just spend time here. Deficit means to say some shortcoming that happens in our system. So this deficit happens because of the fiscal consolidation. So automatically what happens here is that, now let's say I need 100 rupees for expenditure, but through the revenue I'm able to generate only 70 rupees. That means 30 rupees would be my deficit altogether. So in order to control the deficit, in order to do things better, I need to alter myself, I need to realign myself, get myself into position. So the improvement in revenue receipts have to be there. Then only I will be able to match the public expenditure. Over a period of time, we have understood that the public expenditure and revenue receipts are directly linked. So somewhere, if you're going to improve on your revenue receipts, then automatically you're also going to improve on the public expenditure factor. Now, Fiscal Responsibility Act, the FRBM Act of the 2003, which is very, very important, that talks about in a disciplined manner how we as a government try to bring in the restrictions, try to bring in the factors. Very clearly we decided that yes, we will actually try to bring in more discipline, more consolidation into this factor, and we wanted the borrowing to be within the limits. We also wanted to see that the expenditure comes in with certain amount of consolidation and other factors, so that we are able to take it in accordance. The revenue is matching so that the expenditure can also be matched. This act was started in the year 2003, and it was actually, the bill was passed in 2000, but then it got enacted in the year 2003. Now this is like a committee which will oversee the spending and the revenue activities together, so that the budgeting exercise becomes more meaningful. With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the factors that have been spoken here will be of a great value to you, both in terms of practical as well as in the theoretical walk of life. In the upcoming sessions, we would be talking more about the economic reforms. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.